You interact with Africa every day, whenever you have a cup of coffee, when you have a chocolate bar. It's not a continent of lack. It's a continent of opportunity. 54 diverse countries. You interact with Africa, you get the best of food and nutrition and nourishment from the continent. Educate yourself about what Africa has contributed to the world and why it's the continent of the future.
Here's to bold visionaries, faithful investors who make God the goal. While some may call them crazy, we see a joyful adventure. God has empowered us to use courageous capital, solving the world's greatest problems under His power for His glory. Welcome to the Faith-Driven Investor Podcast. Opinions expressed in this podcast, including the team and guests, are solely their opinions. Hosts and guests may maintain positions and securities discussed. This podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be relied upon as specific investment advice for any individual or organization. Thanks for listening.
Greetings, faith-driven community. We are back at the Dallas Lions Den. And this Lions Den community has been just an incredible blessing to us as faith-driven entrepreneurs and investors as we get to see some of the most innovative entrepreneurs that are out there. And in addition to that, some of the greatest professional fund managers. Today, we have one of those Christ-following, faith-driven fund managers with us on the program. Ndidi Okonkwo is the CEO of the One Campaign, but she comes to her work as an institutional investor in food and agriculture. So she's going to be sharing with us about how we as the body of Christ can get involved in Africa, how we can think about lending our voice to the political process, how we can solve problems as entrepreneurs and investors, and just grateful that you're here, grateful for her being with us, and that you might get down on your knees and ask God how He might have you steward His financial resources and your vocational resources towards His glory and lifting up a continent like Africa. Thanks for tuning in. You're an incredible trooper. You just came from Nigeria.
From Nairobi.
From Nairobi. Even further, even harder, right? So if you're traveling all the way around the world regularly, there must be something you're really passionate about. And there must be a problem that you're trying to solve. I know you well enough to know that you're creative, you're a change maker. We're going to talk a little bit about your background. But what is it that you've seen God do in His world and the kingdom of God just over the last 3 months? We found ourselves at a moment in history where USAID is pulled out of Africa. We found ourselves at a time where the church is just starting to awaken to the opportunity of getting involved in a place. And you have been positioned as the leader of the One Campaign. Campaign so many of us know from being big U2 and Bono fans, started by Bono a couple of decades ago. Great scale and platform, and God has chosen you to lead that organization in such a time as this. What's going on?
Well, I think it's an interesting time. It's an inflection point where we're seeing the world retreat.
Yeah.
Geopolitics really affecting all regions of the world. And many countries are saying me first, my country first, my people first, my family first, and retreating from this concept of brotherly love, that we're more united as people of faith, that we have more in common because we serve the same God and we live in the same planet, and we're retreating from that. So it's been a tough 3 months because it's not just unique to the US. We're seeing that retreat happening across Europe.
Yeah.
And even in other regions of the world. But I think it's also a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call that as people, we've been too dependent on a few men and their ideologies, and that we've kind of drifted away from the foundations of our faith and fundamentally what we stand for. I'm reminded of the story of the Good Samaritan. And we reflect on that at this time because they are vulnerable people all over the world who have been cut off because of the flattening of USAID. It's not even retreating from Africa. It's the flattening of an organization that actually provided America's soft power in the world. Showed up to invest in development and invest in people. And in fact, the One Campaign has some data that shows that $1 invested today saves $103 in defense action. So that investing in jobs and wealth and health of people is a much better and cheaper investment than going to quell conflicts.
By creating stability.
Instability. And instability is created by poverty and lack and inequality. And so we are in the wrong. We are seeing the world retreat to the wrong side of history, where money is moving from investment in people to investment in guns and weapons.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wake-up call for us. It's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call for African leaders. It's a wake-up call for Christian leaders. And it's a wake-up call for people who have hope and faith. Because if you're hopeless and you don't believe in love and justice and equality, you're retreating to isolationism. And that's dangerous. So I'm giving this awesome responsibility as the CEO of One Campaign, a global advocacy organization. And one, we fight for the investments to ensure economic opportunity and healthier lives in Africa. And our vision is that Africa is an equal player. And we have teams across the world, young people, faith leaders, team members, celebrity voices who still believe that we're better together as one than we are working as divided people. And so I'm excited about this wake-up call opportunity, this inflection point where we get to redefine what humanity should be doing and what type of future we want. And we're not deterred. We're not deterred by what we see because we are people of faith. We look beyond the natural to say, what is God doing at this time? And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm excited about the work you're doing, Henry, through Faith-Driven Investor and Faith-Driven Entrepreneur, because you're building bridges. You're not blowing up bridges, you're building them because you believe that together we can create wealth, we can create equity, we can create justice, we can give hope, we can show love, and we can demonstrate and rebuild the walls that God has called us to create at this time.
As you talk about being on the right side of history or the wrong side of history, it makes me think about history a bit, of course. And I think about men and women of faith in the 1800s. Before big, powerful leaders in D.C. and in London and other capitals were the ones that said, we're going to go ahead and store tax capital to invest in plans. There's a point in time when the average individual Christ follower saw opportunities, motivated by their faith, wanting to love their brother, their neighbor, as in the parable of the Good Samaritan, and got on a boat at great peril to life and limb to love on a continent that, fast forward to today, there are churches and hospitals and schools based on individuals that didn't wait for their president or their governor or their leader. They got involved and made it happen. Do you get a sense that there's an opportunity? So many of the people watching this podcast, listening to this podcast, will be individuals and they're not in elected office and they don't have the power of the purse strings. What do you see? What would be your call and your challenge to the individual Christian, motivated by their Christian faith, who understands that 750 million of their brothers and sisters live on a continent? What can an individual person do?
Well, I would say there's so much they can do. I would say number one is everybody has a voice. You can use your voice to show support for policies and programs that are focused on life-saving medicines and humanitarian support. At the One Campaign over 20 years ago, we fought for PEPFAR, the Presidential Emergency Initiative on HIV. It was people of faith who rallied around to push their congressmen and their senators to pass the bill for PEPFAR. Under the Bush administration, at a time, the Iraq War, when there was a lot of hopelessness. And we saw Christians rise, and Christian faith leaders rise and say, we cannot let our brothers and sisters be ravaged by HIV/AIDS. We cannot let this continue. And through their work, 26 million lives were saved. And the U.S. mobilized an amazing program, which has been sustained, but it's at the risk of being cut off at this time. And we are pushing for people of faith to tell their congressmen and their senators, no, we need PEPFAR, and we need PEPFAR to be transitioned. Africans want to own it. And guess what? Before, Americans were paying 100% of PEPFAR. The cost of HIV/AIDS treatment at that time was $10,000 per person. Now it's down to $40 per person. African governments pay over 80% of that cost. But let's have a runway where there's a pathway to sustainability. Instead of abruptly cutting off PEPFAR, we need the government to gradually transition and give us till 2030 for that transition. Every year, reducing how much is given. So use your voice. Use your voice. You have the power to push your elected official to make the right choice. And I'm using PEPFAR as an example. The second thing is, I really believe people of faith can partner across the continents. People of faith in the United States, in the UK, in Europe, all over Europe, fighting alongside their faith counterparts in Africa to say, what do we have in our hand? We have knowledge, we have capacity, we have resources. What can we transfer and share with each other? We're creating a diaspora health fund. We believe this is an important time to fill the gaps for local organizations, many of them faith-based organizations, like you've talked about, the hospitals, the healthcare centers, the child care centers. And the diaspora will contribute money and would love to see people of faith match it. And it's a small amounts of money that can add up to support local organizations at this time through a transparent giving program run by churches with people of faith on the ground, and it's a diaspora health fund. And then the third way I think people of faith can help is by really investing in educating themselves and their children, because we have to change narratives. Henry, it's not a continent of lack. It's a continent of opportunity. 54 diverse countries. You interact with Africa every day, whenever you have a cup of coffee, when you have a chocolate bar, when you eat a sesame bun or sesame bagel. You interact with Africa. You get the best of food and nutrition and nourishment from the continent. Educate yourself about what Africa has contributed to the world and why it's the continent of the future. We believe Africa can generate and produce the workforce for the future, because population with going to be 2.5 billion by the 2050 is going to have the youngest workforce, 70% under 35 years old, and 1 out of every 4 young people in the world will be African. This is the workforce for the future. Let's ensure that we educate ourselves about this workforce for the future, engage with this workforce for the future, embrace this workforce for the future, plan a visit to the continent, see for yourself like Henry has, and think about how you can learn, how you can grow, and how you can serve. I think this is an important time for that, because we need to break down these stereotypes and these biases that have kept us from seeing each other as equals, from seeing each other as partners in God's movement for the world, and from embracing the moment to fight for justice and equity.
God owns it all, and He cares deeply about the how, where, and why behind our investment strategies. Money is put into our hands to steward wisely for His glory and for the flourishing of the people around us. That's why Faith Driven Investor created our foundation groups, 1 hour a week for 6 weeks, online or in person. Connect with like-minded investors to walk through the faith-driven investing study. Hear real-life stories of battle-tested investors solving some of the world's greatest problems. Discuss what it means to embrace your call to impact the world for God's glory, and get in the game. Don't battle alone. Your calling is too important. Visit faithdriveninvestor.org and join a group today.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point there. I'll tell you, in my own life and in the life of our audience of faith-driven entrepreneurs and faith-driven investors, well, at least I'll speak for myself, I've tended to have issues with large governments where I think that sometimes they've legislated away my ability to love my neighbors through big programs. And so I want to think about, what can I do as an individual entrepreneur, an investor, to love on Africa and be loved by Africa. Maybe we'll get into that concept here in a little bit. And what you're suggesting is that, while maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that there is a role for a faith-driven entrepreneur, a faith-driven investor, but there's also a way to engage with government leaders by using your voice. And we've seen that happen before in Africa.
We have.
Where some minority investors came in to companies in South Africa and said, hey, I'm a shareholder in this company that is extending apartheid, and I think that's an injustice.
Yeah.
And so a couple of small voices were able to steer a very large organization. You're suggesting that each of us has a voice, and while we may be called to be a faith-driven entrepreneur or an investor directly, but we still should recognize that there are governments that have the ability to enact or pull back programs, and we as the body of Christ should let our opinions as stakeholders in that process be known. And even if you're just a small citizen of a state or of a country, you can extend a voice. Tell us a little bit more about what that looks like. You're emailing a congressman. How does that work?
You're writing letters to Congress. You're emailing. You're even visiting Congress in D.C. or in your home state.
Yeah.
We recently had a power summit. Henry, you came and prayed with the leaders. I prayed with them before they went to the Hill. And it was just a blessing to see faith leaders and ordinary citizens who care actually praying together and calling out their senators' names and their congressmen's and women's names, and
Very
then
powerful.
going to Congress to say, I care about these issues.
Yeah.
Because guess what? If they don't hear from their members, if they don't hear from the citizens of their states, they don't believe that these issues matter. And so you telling them, I care about these issues. It matters to me how our country spends our money. And guess what? This misconception that America spends all its money abroad is completely false. In fact, less than 1% of US GDP goes abroad for any issues. To Africa, it's less than 0.2%, something around that. So it's minuscule. But it's such a powerful, minuscule contribution because it demonstrates that we're united, that we care, that we're good brothers and sisters. And we call it soft power. It's powerful when people think someone sitting in the US, in Arkansas, Arizona, in Nebraska cares about me.
Yeah. And that's a country
Right?
that's been blessed
Yes.
to be a blessing.
And guess what? America has benefited from the care of other parts of the world. America is a country of immigrants from around the world. And we've seen the partnerships that have enabled America to thrive. And this is a time to move deeper and strengthen those partnerships and fight for those partnerships so that no one is left behind.
One of the things also, though, to be clear, because there are going to be listeners from both sides of the political aisle that are listening to this, that your suggestion is that actually what's happening is that increasingly African nations are being more responsible for the financial
Definitely.
contributions.
They have taken up to 80% of the
Yeah.
cost. And we want to just not have such an abrupt cut, but
Yeah.
we're ready to take on 100% of the cost. PEPFAR was born during a Republican administration. Some of the strongest supporters of PEPFAR are Republicans. And this is a program that was supported from both sides of the aisle as a very effective use of American funding with a return on investment. We are not talking about investing in a black hole and wasting resources. We're saying let our congressmen and women vote for what matters, that is utilized effectively, changes lives, improves people's outcomes, and demonstrates a pathway to sustainability.
Okay, now we're going to go backwards. Who are you? Where did you come from?
So I'm Ndidi Okonkwo Nwuneli. I'm a social entrepreneur from Nigeria. My mom is American, my father's Nigerian, so I've had dual nationality from birth. I was not born into a Christian home. My parents are intellectuals, professors. They both met at Cornell in the 60s. But people of faith found me. They came to our home. They introduced us to Christ at an early age. I gave my life to Christ when I was 13, but asked as my 10th birthday present to be baptized. And all of us were baptized on the same day, all 5 kids. We got to pick out our godparents, and it was a request that we had for our parents. And God has been the anchor of my life from...
How did that go?
13.
That's amazing to me. All 5 kids
Yes.
said, we want to be baptized. You go to your mother and father and say, we're going to do this. There are some intellectuals, faith had not been a part of life. How do they receive that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. It would be good to ask them how they received. And Nate was a baby, so he didn't ask. But everybody else, 5 years old, 10, I was 10, 12, 14, 16. All we have a picture where we were baptized. But for me, it was interesting because my parents, while they were supportive of our choices, they said you can be Muslim, Christian, you get agnostic, you get to pick what you want. We're not going to impose on you. But they got a little worried because of how fervent I was. I used to go to like vigils and all-night prayer meetings. And then my mom would punish me for having to run out of the house to try and go to these things. So imagine, now we're begging our kids to go.
Yes,
But
yes, yes.
You know, the fervency. But what attracted me to Christianity was that I saw love and joy in people of faith. I saw a commitment to service. It was attractive because I saw people who lived out their faith. And that was an inspiration to me. And I haven't looked back. So I think giving my life to Christ at a young age really was very pivotal to the choices and decisions because I've let God lead me and dream for me. And the master strategist has been so faithful, and I'm so grateful. So from Nigeria, I moved to the US. I went to the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, worked for McKinsey in Chicago, went to Harvard Business School. And God has opened so many doors. I ended up then becoming a serial social entrepreneur, starting Leap Africa, co-founding Ace Foods with my husband, Mezu, Sahel Consulting, Sahel Capital, founding African Food Changemakers, which now works with entrepreneurs in 49 African countries, serving on lots of global and local boards, including the Rockefeller Foundation, Chanel Foundation, the Bridgespan Group, many organizations, banks, consumer goods like Nestle. And now I'm running the One campaign. I'm 1 year in. It's been the toughest job I've ever had. It's a difficult time because One has offices in the G7 countries. We have an office in Berlin, in Paris, London, Brussels, Nigeria, South Africa, Senegal, Canada, and the US. So running a global organization at a very difficult time in world history, but we're called for such a time as this.
Do you think that your stint as co-host with me of the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur Africa podcast really launched your career?
I think actually,
Are you kidding?
wasn't
that fun?
I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And I think, Henry, there are two things that I've taken away from my relationship with you that have been such a blessing. One is your relentless pursuit of excellence and your commitment to seeing people and meeting them where they are. That's just exceptional. I walked into the room here and saw people who I had introduced to you, who are now your bosom buddies. And so you invest in relationships and you deepen relationships and you connect and you live life with open hands. You know, I talk about that when people say, what will you tell your younger self? I say, live your life with open hands so you can give and receive what God has for you. Like when you clench your fist, you're not open to receiving. And I think you're someone who is open every day to receive what God has in store for you. So thank you for doing that. The second aspect of the journey that I enjoyed so much was the voices we got to hear, the stories we heard. They challenged me. They inspired me. And on very difficult days after doing that podcast, I was so energized, so motivated. And I remember so many of those stories every single day. So I think for me, I think you opened my eyes to the journeys that people had.
Well, I was mostly, of course, kidding you. But thank you. That was very encouraging. And you can go back and you can find the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur podcast for Africa. Some great interviews with some incredible people. I want to circle back in because you hinted at some of your background in agriculture and food when you're talking about the sesame buns and things like that, and chocolate and coffee. You and Mezwo, your husband, started Sahel Consulting and then Sahel Capital. With this audience, we spent a lot of time talking about technology and fintech and medtech because it's a little bit about my background. But agriculture is so important in Africa, and there's really great business to be done. And it's so important. Before we can talk about the right fintech application, we got to realize that people need to get food and feed themselves in Africa, but there's so much food that goes beyond Africa. Can you just give us an overview of an industry that many of us just won't know of?
So I would say the food ecosystem is one of the largest ecosystems in the world. And actually, some of the largest companies in the world are food businesses. So it's not unique to Africa.
The Faith-Driven Investor Conference. Here's to faithful disruptors, the ones who are spreading seeds instead of building storehouses. The ones who solve real problems and take righteous risks. God didn't give you your platform to play it safe. That's why every February, faith-driven investors across 100 countries are gathering in person, online, or at watch parties around the world. 3 hours, battle-tested investors, zero fluff. This isn't just hype, it's a movement. For more information, visit faithdriveninvestorconference.org. That's faithdriveninvestorconference.org. Together, we can solve the world's greatest problems.
You know, we often joke that there's one industry you have to interact with multiple times a day, and that's the food ecosystem. And why it's such a transformational ecosystem is that the number of players through it and the impact you can have through it is phenomenal. Everything starts with a farmer and with soil and with seeds and fertilizer, and then from farm all the way to your gut and to your tummy. Not even just to the fork, but how it interacts with your tummy. And that's why we talk about nutrition, right? overnutrition, undernutrition. And so that from farm to gut and so is just a powerful ecosystem. It's complex, it's important, it generates
I
wealth,
love that because in
generates
America we
jobs.
talk about farm to table, and you're like, no, don't stop at the table. Farm to gut.
Yes, yes. Because how you interact with food matters. And how food is grown actually affects how you digest it. So God called us into this ecosystem actually during a food crisis in 2008. And we've had many since then. But it shocked me because I was living in Senegal at the time where people were actually rioting because of the price of bread had increased. And it happened because of some, a fuel crisis and oil and gas crisis in the, Dead Sea. And that just shows you how one shock in another part of the world affects another region. And so I got into this ecosystem, and the more I learned about it, the more shocked I was that so many of us Christians have abandoned this ecosystem and left it to really traders and speculators. And that's why you have commodity prices going up and families can't eat. So we got into the system to say, well, how can we transform the food ecosystem in Africa? We're naturally endowed for agricultural excellence in Africa. It's one continent that can feed itself and the world. In terms of arable land, in terms of weather, in terms of the population that works in agriculture, in terms of our indigenous knowledge, there's just so much God has blessed us with. However, from a managerial perspective, it's a broken sector. And so what we came in to do was not only to provide knowledge and skills and connect the dots, but also to unlock financing. And through the companies we've created, Ace Foods, we've demonstrated how powerful it is actually having products on shelves and how it can change not just the lives of the farmers, it can displace imports, but also the lives of the distributors and the customers. And our food company processes spices, complementary foods, and snacks for children, all healthy, all indigenous, all sourced locally. And that's probably been one of the ones I've been most proud of because we can give a warm meal to all our staff. They have health insurance. We've seen them stay in the country and not migrate because they can provide a better livelihood for their children. And the impact is just phenomenal. And our factory, they actually fast together. They pray together. And it's just a beautiful ecosystem and a beautiful testimony of God's goodness. Sahel Consulting now works across Africa, Sahel Capital as well. And African Food Changemakers provides data and resources and online training to entrepreneurs to enable them scale. And our vision at African Food Changemakers is 1 million entrepreneurs who are feeding Africa and nourishing the world, leveraging innovation, technology, and data. So it's for me, it's a very exciting sector. And
is Ace a listed company?
No, it's not. We're not ready to list it yet, but Neil is on our board, and he's an investor
Good friend of
in Ace
ours.
Foods.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of us, when we think about food and we think about Africa, we think about starving kids and just real famine and real issues. And presumably you're going to be in favor of aid. And I think that when you see somebody starving, they can't really think about innovating, getting involved in creating jobs until they can get food on their tables for their families, right? Talk about just what does it look like for an investor? A lot of people watching this, listening to this, are going to be faith-driven investors who get it like, how do I invest in the faith-driven ecosystem to be able to create greater food stability so that when famines come, they're not as big of a deal? And you mentioned, there are geopolitical shocks and some things that are beyond the control of any type of investor. But I don't know that a lot of us have really thought of investing in food. We know about Andela, we know about Flutterwave, we know that a lot of these unicorns are coming out of Africa and legitimate business. But how might somebody get involved in investing in the food ecosystem in Africa?
Well, there are lots of ways to get involved. And you've just painted the spectrum of interventions from grants, where you can support local organizations, food banks, grants programs that support school feeding, etc. And that's at one spectrum. And the Africa Philanthropy Forum is an excellent entry point because it matches you with local philanthropists on the ground who are doing just that, right? And then you have concessional financing. Because yes, there are opportunities to invest as private equity, venture capital, or even angel in patient capital, because ag and food requires patient capital, at least 7 to 9 years for businesses to grow planting seasons, in depending on the value chain. Some crops have a 2-year cycle before they're fully ready, like cassava. Some can grow like vegetables in 3 months. So that funding cycle and applying your resources to either working capital, it's infrastructure investment, to growth capital will vary based on your appetite for risk and your knowledge of the sector. But I would say we need concessional financing and guarantees at the lower spectrum for the small and medium-sized enterprises. For the large businesses...
Before we go into that, how does an investor find these concessional opportunities?
Well, we have Sahel Capital. Sahel Capital has multiple funds. It has a loan fund where you can actually invest and get your money back because it's guaranteed as a loan. And they also have a private equity fund. And there are quite a few emerging organizations like Sahel, but Sahel is unique because we focus only on agriculture and food, right? And that's our sector excellence. We understand the sector deeply and we understand how to hedge risks in that sector. And so I think Sahel is a great one to look at. And Ndidi Nwuneli is the managing partner and the visionary behind it, but he has a group of very senior leaders, many of them Christian, committed to this, with offices in Abidjan, Lagos, and Nairobi. So I would encourage you to partner with Sahel. And then for the larger companies, there are lots of opportunities. There's export financing, there's trade financing that's shorter term. And then obviously some companies are traded on the stock exchange. We have companies in the palm industry, in food manufacturing that are that you can invest in directly by buying stocks. And the African stock exchanges have done really well. Hoover and Stanford just released a report that some of our stock markets have done 6x the S&P. And the food stocks are some of the strongest stocks on these stock exchanges because people need food. And there are multinationals operating in Africa like Nestle that have done extremely well in Africa. So I would say that that's a full spectrum of interventions, but there are opportunities to be philanthropic, to have concessional financing and grant financing, or to invest for the long term.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your friendship and your partnership in the movement, taking the time to spend with us and our audience. And may God bless you, sister.
Thank you, my brother. Thanks for all you do. And thank you for loving God's people and showing it through the actions that you commit to every day, and for mentoring the next generation of Henry Kaestners.
Come for content, stay for community. Join a faith-driven investing group online or in person. Visit faithdriveninvestor.org. That's faithdriveninvestor.org.